A little bit of a different angle and a little bit of a different topic today, but since I've been getting into personal finance more over the last few months, I've just been thinking about how I spend money a little bit differently, and I thought it would be fun to reflect on some of my most expensive purchases of my 20s so far, and also check in 2 years from now and see how that's changed. See if in the next 2 years I really racked up some other purchases that kind of outshine these. First on the list, I'm gonna get this out of the way first because I don't know that it qualifies as a purchase since it's technically the accumulation of several purchases, but I feel like I can't not talk about travel. Travel is a huge expense, and it's something I've really prioritized over the last 3 years, pretty much ever since I started working full-time at the closer to the current salary that I'm making, and I felt like I had enough disposable income to go on trips. So each trip that I've gone on across the last 3 years has cost me about $7,000 each. So that's a total, if we want to have travel as one big category, of $21,000, which is by far the most amount of money that I have spent on any one thing in my 20s, in my life. I can't think of anything that even comes close to that. And you'll see even once we get towards the bottom of the list, we really have that last item barely beating out other honorable mentions that I've included with less context. But I feel like travel is just so worth it, even though it's an experiential thing and not a physical item that I'm always able to use every day. And just nothing compares to travel for me. It's one of my biggest priorities. I never regret traveling. And the last few years, I've been able to budget for every trip that I've been on. So even before I got really into personal finance and having a monthly budget, I would always plan okay, I think my trip is gonna cost about this much. I'm gonna save up for it over these months. This is how much I need to be putting in my travel bucket every month. Even if I wasn't tracking any other type of savings I was doing, I would always track how much money was going into my travel bucket. So I knew once I got on the trip, I didn't have to be anxious about not spending a lot of money. I didn't have to be anxious about, do I have enough money to go out to eat as much as I want on this trip? Should I be trying to cook more on this trip? I don't know, all of that. I just don't have to worry about it because by the time I get to my trip, I know that I've saved enough money. All of that being said, my 3 big trips were in 2022. I did a national parks road trip with my boyfriend, and we went to a bunch of the Utah national parks. We went to Zion, Arches, Canyonlands, and then at the very end of the trip, we went through the Grand Canyon. And we also did, at the beginning of our trip, a few days in Vegas. We rented one of those kind of trendy camper vans that has the fun designs on the outside. It was a really great experience, but I think what made this trip kind of expensive is that we didn't just stay in the camper van. There were a few nights where we booked hotels. And this was kind of a last minute decision on our part. And even though I had budgeted for this in the trip, I didn't know that I was going to have to use all of that budget. I thought oh, maybe I over budgeted and this will be a nice surprise, but ended up being about spot on because a couple weeks before the trip, we were looking into campsites and things like that. And I think I went into the trip thinking we have this camper van. We're not going to have to pay for a campsite or pay for a hotel or anything like that. We're just going to be able to park our camper van somewhere and be fine. And then we started getting closer and we were both getting a little bit nervous about finding a spot for the camper van. We didn't really want to park it overnight in a Walmart. I know that a lot of people do that when they're doing van life or RVing or whatever. We didn't want to have to do that. We didn't want to be somewhere where there wasn't a bathroom, and that's kind of the situation with a lot of the, I guess, free range camping where you can just kind of park on the side of the road somewhere and camp. For us, we didn't feel comfortable doing that. So kind of last minute, we booked a bunch of campgrounds, and then anywhere we couldn't get a campground reservation, we booked a hotel. So that trip did end up being a little bit pricier, only because we did a glamping situation that was on the higher end, and then we also ended up booking hotels. So I think that's my one disclaimer of that trip. Plus the days that we did in Vegas, that was obviously a little bit more expensive, even though people typically think road trip and camping is going to be a cheap vacation. It was not in our case. In 2023, we went to Norway around my birthday, and actually both of those trips were around my birthday, the road trip one and the Norway one. For Norway, we rented a car and we drove from Oslo to Bergen. And then once we got to Bergen, we ditched our rental car and stayed there for a few days. Our whole road trip took, I think, 4 or 5 days total. And then we were in Bergen for a few days and then eventually took a train back to Oslo. and then came home. That trip I feel like is understandably more expensive because there's the international travel, having to have a hotel in every city, and then also renting the car. We did rent an electric car though, and that helped because gas prices in Norway are crazy. One thing that was not factored in for this trip that ended up being kind of expensive, more so for my partner than for me, is that he lost his passport, and we found out as we were on a train to the airport on the day that our flight left. So this was also Easter weekend, and nothing in Norway is open on Easter weekend. The embassy is not open. The place where you get your passport picture taken is not open. So we ended up having to stay 2 extra nights. My partner did cover the hotel for both extra nights, and he paid for his plane ticket home. Did he pay for? I think I paid him back for my plane ticket. All I remember is that each of our flights back was just barely under what we had paid round trip, and that did hurt. The third big trip is one that I just went on. I went to England with one of my best friends, and there's a whole video about that on my channel already, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. But another expensive trip, international travel, lots of hotels. We did lots of trains to get to and from all the cities we were going to. And we also went to see the Eras Tour, so that's another big expense. But aside from that, I actually over budgeted on food for that trip. I thought that I was going to spend way more money on food, or I at least wanted to give myself the cushion to, because London is not a cheap city, and I feel like England as a whole is a little bit on the expensive side. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't cutting it too close on going out to eat. I didn't want to feel like I couldn't go get high tea one day if we walked by a place and it looked cool, or I didn't want to have to think about, like, towards the end of the trip, like, maybe we should do fast food instead of going out somewhere that's like more local. I just didn't want to have to worry about that, so I gave myself a huge food budget. And halfway through the trip, I realized I was not spending that much on food, but there were more like experiences, like museum entry fees, different things like that, and then like little souvenirs, and I wanted more money in that category. So I still ended up spending what I expected to on the trip, but in different ways than I intended, which I had never really tracked on a trip before. So I don't know if that's true every time, where I think I spend more money on food and then I end up, it kind of balances out with like the souvenirs. I don't know. I'll be intrigued to see how that goes on trips in the future. Okay, number 2, we have Invisalign. I paid for my own Invisalign 2 years ago almost. I have had braces twice. I had braces when I was in 3rd grade, and they just put them on the front 4 teeth on the top and the bottom. And this was because they said that the way that my teeth were crowded, there wasn't gonna be enough room or something, or they wanted to like start with the adult teeth I already had and then do a second round of braces when I had lost all my baby teeth. I don't know, but it was a plan for me to have braces twice. And after I had braces in high school, they said, here's your retainer, wear it for 2 years, and then you don't have to wear it anymore. And that's what I did. I think that's the advice that a lot of people were given like 10 years ago, before Invisalign was as common. Also, the retainer that they gave me, it was one of those like plastic and metal retainers. I don't have it anymore. If I can find a picture of one online, I'll insert it, because I feel like some people might have no idea what I'm even talking about. But that was the kind of retainer that I had, and they told me, you're gonna grow out of it, it's not gonna fit anymore, just wear it for 2 years and then you can stop. So I was like, okay, that kind of doesn't make any sense, because I have all of my adult teeth and we just fixed my teeth, so shouldn't they always look like this? What do you mean I'm gonna grow out of it? These are questions I didn't ask as a 16-year-old getting her braces off. So this brings me to 2 years ago. I had just started my first, I'd say like stable job, the one that allowed me to go on all these vacations and had decent benefits. I think a bird just hit my window. I don't know what that was. It was either a very large dragonfly, potentially, or a very small bird. Or it's really windy and that was a twig. Anyway, it's happening again. What's going on? I think it's a tree branch. Anyway, flash forward 2 years ago, some of my bottom teeth have shifted. It's nothing that you can tell when I smile or even just like looking at me when I'm talking, but it is something that I noticed, and I could tell that they were shifting. And I also noticed that I was starting to bite my lower lip a lot when I was eating. and it was in the exact spot that one of my teeth had like shifted in. I wish that I had pictures to describe this, but also I feel like no one wants to see these kinds of pictures. But it's just hard to verbally explain. So anyway, one of my teeth had shifted kind of in, and that was the part that I kept biting my lip, and I think it's something to do with like chewing and whatever. I don't know, how your mouth moves. It was driving me crazy, and I went to the dentist for the first time since having my new insurance with my new job, and they said you'd be a good candidate for Invisalign. And they told me it would only take like 14 weeks, which was super cool, except that Invisalign is just a flat fee. There's no pricing based on the number of visits that you need. There's no pricing based on, I don't know, the number of trays they need to order for you. There may be, actually, I don't know. Maybe it was just because mine was within a certain range. It was a flat fee, and if you go beyond that, then they start charging you per visit or per tray that you have to get. But anyway, for me, it was $4,000 total for my 14 weeks. I think I was switching trays every week or every other week. And for anyone who doesn't know how Invisalign works, they basically put these little like buttons on your teeth. They're kind of like, just think of it like a plastic brace. Like if you're familiar with traditional metal braces, they put something kind of like that, but much smaller, that is kind of clear on your teeth. They do all of that, and then they give you trays that snap into those buttons, and they move different teeth. So usually if a tooth needs to move a lot, it's gonna have a button on it to help the aligner tray grab it and like move it to where it needs to go. And this happens over time. Each tray changes a little bit and gets progressively closer to having totally straight teeth. And I am really happy with my results. I don't bite my lip nearly as much as I used to. It happens every now and then, but much less regularly. This felt like a medical emergency to me, which sounds very dramatic in hindsight, but in the moment, at the time, I just remember every time I would eat, I would bite my lip, and it was getting to the point where it was so swollen, I just started biting it when I was talking. And it was almost just like a continuous like open wound in my mouth, which is really gross and really unpleasant and really painful. And this fixed it. So I'm happy with it. I wish that I could have been put on some sort of like pricing structure that was smaller, since I really didn't need the aligners for very long. And I think that fee covers you for like 2 years or something, but such is life. I did get some sort of like orthodontic credit through my insurance, but that just paid for part of the retainers. And then I think it paid for part of something else, because I got a check in the mail from my dentist like months later that I had overpaid by $130 or something. But including the cost of the retainers, I would say total, the whole experience was around $4,000. Number 3, we have my PC that I built. So back in 2017, I had just transferred schools. I was in my 3rd year of college, university, whatever you want to call it. And that is not really prime time for making friends when you're a transfer student. So I started playing a lot of video games. I started a gaming channel, and I was doing all of that on my little MacBook Pro, which is not really made for gaming or for video editing. So it became a very big struggle. Anyway, I decided that I wanted to build myself a PC. There's actually even more backstory to this. So back up even before I transferred, even before I decided I wanted to build a computer, I had been saving up to go on a trip to Thailand with my boyfriend at the time. We were in college and we both really wanted to travel, and we were looking at something that we could do. And I feel like Thailand travel backpackers were really trendy at the time, and we were both watching a lot of those kinds of YouTube videos. And it's also one of those trips that the most expensive thing is the plane ticket, and then once you get there, everything is very inexpensive, or at least was at the time. And I just remember pricing it all out and thinking like, okay, we can do this for like $2,000 each. I will save up my $2,000 from my like part-time jobs that I'm doing in between school. You save up your $2,000, and then over the summer 2017, we're gonna go on this trip together. So I'm saving, have this goal in mind. It's to the point where my parents even bought me one of those like universal outlet converters for Christmas of 2016. So this plan had been in place for quite a while. And then now it's like spring of 2017. I have just started my YouTube channel. I'm getting into that kind of stuff. and I am getting ready to go on this trip, and like that's exciting. And I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to look more at like booking things like hotel prices based on the exact times that we're thinking about going, and really like budgeting it out, really seeing like, okay, if we go to these cities, what would we do in each location, building the itinerary. And then my boyfriend at the time tells me that he hasn't been saving for the trip and he doesn't want to go, basically. So I think to myself, well, I have been saving for the trip and I have my $2,000 set aside, and I am going to spend it on myself, because if you're not going to go on the trip with me, then I'm not going to save this for when you're ready to go on the trip. I'm going to spend this on myself now. And if we decide to do a trip later, then I will save back up for that trip when you tell me you're ready to go on it, since I've been saving for months and you didn't even tell me that you weren't doing the same thing. So I decided to take all of that money and take all of my energy and efforts and funnel them into building a PC and researching computer parts, and really just kind of like making the most of the situation, because I was pretty mad that I had this idea in my head of what I was saving my money for, and then it like didn't come to fruition, especially because this would have been like my first big trip that I got to plan. And then that didn't happen for like 5 years later when I went on that road trip. So I decided to build myself a computer for basically just playing The Sims and making videos, which kind of sounds like overkill, but when you think about the software that goes into video editing and like screen recording and all this other stuff, it kind of balances out. But the other caveat to this category is that total, I think this computer has cost me more than $2,000, because I'm not sure that that $2,000 included the peripherals like a keyboard, a mouse, a monitor, all of that stuff. It may have, but since then I've upgraded. So I've upgraded all of those things that I just mentioned, and I've also upgraded parts in my computer. I did that about 2 or 3 years after building it. I upgraded a few parts because I was definitely being thriftier when I first built it and trying to stick to that budget. And over time, I was doing more live streaming and other things that I just needed more powerful components. So I upgraded them later. Total, I would say that the computer has probably cost me like closer to $3,000, but that upfront cost that I spent on building it was $2,000. Number 4, I feel like we're getting to the final stretch, but number 4, this one I have the most like mixed feelings about, because it feels really excessive for the item that it is. And this is my coffee table, and I spent $1,300 on it, which feels like a lot to me. That is a bigger amount of money than I feel like I've spent on any one thing. And I think that's because the other things on my list feel more like in the experience category. Even the computer, because part of the experience was building it and like using it. A coffee table just kind of sits there, and even though you do use it every day, it's not quite the same. And you don't really feel as big of a difference of using a $50 coffee table that you got at IKEA to then using a $1,300 coffee table that is like made to order. This one also comes with backstory, of course. And the backstory is that 2 years ago, I was getting ready to move into my first apartment by myself. And this was after living with a roommate who I didn't super trust to take great care of things. And the coffee table that I had at the time was $50 from IKEA. Very cheap, did not care if she messed it up. All of the other furniture that I had at the time was all furniture that I got as like hand-me-downs from my parents. So even though it was really good quality furniture, I didn't want it to get messed up. If it did get messed up, it wasn't as big of a deal to me because it wasn't furniture that I paid for. So this brings me to my just general like love of interior design. Whenever I used to play The Sims, I would always spend way more time building than actually playing the game. And around the time that I was looking to move, I also found Caroline Winkler on YouTube, and I just love all of her interior design stuff. I think she still has the coffee table, but she has a coffee table that is round, and I always really liked it because I really like the advice of everything in your space can't be the same shape, you need to break it up somehow. And all of my other living room furniture was very rectangular. So I wanted something round to stand out more, and also just like elevate all of this furniture that I've been used to looking at for years. I looked up where she got her coffee table from, and then I found another coffee table that they make, and I really liked it, and it was really expensive, and for weeks and weeks and weeks I didn't buy it because I was wondering if it was too much. and I just kind of like kept it in the back of my mind, but I would think about it pretty frequently. Now I feel like this is where the story gets a little bit silly. So I finally decided to buy it when I was at the beach with one of my friends, and we were hanging out in our hotel room, and we had taken some gummies. And I was telling her about the coffee table and how I really wanted to buy it, and she is always my friend who like talks me out of impulse buys. Like even growing up when we were in middle school and we were at the mall together with like $20 each, and I would say I wanted something from Claire's, and she would like not make me save my money. A lot of times I just didn't listen to her, but she would always try to get me to save my money until we had looked everywhere else first and then like come back and get the thing if it was still the thing I wanted most. So she's kind of like my litmus test for if something is a good purchase or not, and I was really convinced she was just gonna talk me out of it, and that was what I needed. So I was telling her about the coffee table, and she said, do you have the money to buy it? And I said yes, and she said, just get it. Like, this coffee table is beautiful, you have to get it. So that's the moment that I realized I can't 100% count on her to talk me out of things, but it also is the moment that I bought the coffee table, and I didn't believe that I bought it for a solid like 3 or 4 days. It hadn't really sunk in that I actually did that. So I did have to wait months and months for it to come. I ordered it in October. It didn't arrive until February. So yeah, I waited like 4 months, and once it came, actually I had it shipped to my boyfriend's place because I was also not sure if the shipping was gonna get moved up and like expedited in some way. I didn't want it to show up while the previous person was still living there. So I put in his address. That ended up being a whole complete nightmare. I so wish I didn't do that because it came when it said it was going to. And they even called me about the day that it was going to be delivered, and I could have just given them my updated address, but I didn't because I thought that something could get lost or it would be more confusing. And when they dropped it off, I tried to have them load it into the back of my car, and the whole thing wouldn't fit. We had to put the legs in one trip and then do the top in another trip. The top of the table is so incredibly heavy. Me and my boyfriend had to carry it by ourselves from my parking deck to my apartment, and it was miserable. Like, I think the stress of carrying a giant piece of glass, but also it's so thick, I don't know how we could have broken it. I don't think that was really a concern. It's not an experience I ever want to go through again. So when we moved me into his place, we did hire movers, and we did replace his coffee table with mine. That was my one sticking point of me moving in, and I didn't really care that much about rearranging any other furniture, except that we had to swap out his coffee table for mine. And he agreed, and his coffee table is now in the garage for when we have more space and need another coffee table. All right, and rounding out the list with my laptop. I bought this laptop last summer. I feel like I've had it for much longer, but I bought this laptop last summer. It is a MacBook Air, and it was $1,200 with taxes and everything, I think. I have the most mixed feelings about this one. I think every other purchase on this list, I can say without a doubt, like, glad I spent the money. With this one, it's not that I'm not glad that I spent the money, it was the timing of it. I think I could have timed it better. So my last MacBook, the MacBook Pro that I was editing my Sims videos on back in the day, it was 100% on its last leg last year. It was super slow. It was almost 10 years old. Like, it just wasn't working properly. And I felt like I really needed to upgrade it, and I felt like I needed to do it kind of immediately. So I bought this computer, and within a week of buying it, somehow a crumb got stuck on the keyboard, and when I closed my computer, the crumb damaged the screen, which is so stupid and makes me so angry because I feel like I'm the kind of person who takes really good care of my things, and to have this really expensive tech purchase be damaged so quickly and over something so stupid, it just like, it infuriates me every time I look at the screen and I see the messed up part where the crumb dented the screen. I don't even know how to explain that, but it's really annoying. I do wish that I had saved up for this a little bit better. I felt like it was kind of an impulse buy, and I did take money from savings to make it happen, not like money from savings that I'd been setting aside specifically for the laptop. It just kind of happened, and I just wanted to do it then, and so I did it then. And I try not to do that anymore when I'm making bigger purchases, at least in the case of the coffee table. It wasn't like I had coffee table money, but I did kind of have like fun money that was in my savings. And I wish that I had built that back up before buying this, because I think that after I bought the coffee table, I never really built that section of my savings account back up. I don't regret buying it because I do use it a lot. It's really helpful. It's way better than my old computer was. It's also just lighter weight. It's easier to like bring to coffee shops and stuff with me. That's why I went with the Air instead of the Pro this time. But I do think that I could have just saved up for a couple months and then bought it at a better time. I also wish that I had bought a version with bigger storage, because I got the laptop with the smallest amount of storage thinking I have an external hard drive, I'll just use that. And now after having the laptop for a year, my external hard drive is like completely almost full. And I can't keep that many files on this laptop. And I also like how quick it runs and all of that. So I'm trying not to keep too many files on it. And it's just making things a little bit challenging. I also can't do a full backup of my phone to this laptop because it takes up so much room. And I always have to back it up to that hard drive, which again takes up room on the hard drive. It's just kind of like it's like an Ouroboros situation. Of this doesn't have enough room, so I use the hard drive, and the hard drive doesn't have enough room, so I use this, and then it never ends. So I do wish that I had saved and was more willing to spend the extra like $100 or $200 to get the upgraded storage. That would be my recommendation if you're looking to kind of like future-proof your electronics and you're not the kind of person who buys the newest thing right when it comes out. I like to use my electronics until they kind of start to die on me and then buy something new. So if you also fall into that category, just always, if you can, spend the extra money to get more storage, because it really future-proofs your device and you don't have to make all these other like one-off purchases of buying external storage and all of these things. So that's my 2 cents there. Okay, and finally, we have our 2 honorable mentions. They were just so close to the laptop price, and also just like another like kind of big purchase that I don't typically make, but felt worth mentioning. So the first one is my dresser. This was $800. I got it from Urban Outfitters, and I also got different knobs to put on it. And this was something that I got when I moved in with my boyfriend, because the dresser I had at the time didn't really work for us and our styles together, and the dresser that he had was way too small for both of us. And last honorable mention is my phone. So I'm filming on my phone. I film all my videos on my phone right now. I don't see the need for a camera at the moment. I would like to get a mic at some point that I can connect to my phone. But right now I just use my phone to record everything, and I got it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I got it right before I went on that road trip, and it was kind of to have like better pictures for the trip. But since then it's taken like everything in me to not upgrade it when a new phone comes out with a better camera. But I know that it's better if I don't do that, and if I do need a dedicated camera, I can always just buy one, and that kind of camera technology changes much slower than phone technology. Anyway, this phone was $1,100, and I did buy it outright. I don't like financing phones, especially because I don't do the whole like upgrade it every 2 years thing. I like to just buy the phone flat out, own it, and then in like 5 years or so, when the phone starts like crapping out and maybe I've like already tried replacing the battery once and other things are just like not working as well, like the OS updates kind of outdate the phone you're on, that's when I upgrade my phone. Whew, okay, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of different video. Getting this video together also made me realize how different the amount of effort it took to save up for all of these things was, especially because you have something like my PC/vacation that didn't happen, and I was like working part-time in school. That $2,000 took me much longer to save up for than $7,000 to go on a vacation when I'm working full-time and in a higher paying job. But to go along with this kind of like semi-financial theme, I'm kind of thinking about doing an entire career history video of like all the jobs that I've had in my 20s and how much I made. It just kind of came to mind as I was going through these different big purchases I made and kind of where I was financially at the time that I made them. So if you are interested in that at all, definitely let me know. And let me know what some of your most expensive purchases have been, especially if you are also like in your 20s or 30s, aside from like a house or a mortgage or like a car. I'm really interested what those like big purchases are.